Iran just got hit. The Iranian economy, already strained by sanctions, struck by a total naval blockade. And within hours, the regime responded with a threat to international energy supply routes. Ladies and gentlemen, we are watching the collapse of a regional security architecture. And what's unfolding right now is something the Pentagon didn't expect for at least another 6 months. Let me break it all down. Hit subscribe right now if you want the high-level intelligence and strategic context you won't find anywhere else. We cover what they won't, every single day. Turn on notifications so you never miss when we expose the next major escalation. Do it now. The Strait of Hormuz, the world's most vital oil choke point, is effectively restricted. This isn't just about regional posturing or a minor skirmish between tankers. It's a systemic breakdown of global energy logistics involving the U.S. Fifth Fleet, the IRGC Navy, and critical Saudi infrastructure. It has the ability to trigger a global economic shock that most Americans are entirely unprepared for. Here's the sequence. At 04 Hawkrid local time yesterday, U.S. naval forces began active boarding operations at the mouth of the Strait of Hormuz, enforcing a strict no-go zone for Iranian-flagged vessels. By 09 o'clock, global oil markets reacted with a 14% price surge. This isn't a diplomatic standoff anymore. It's an active naval blockade. The Wall Street Journal confirmed that the USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group has moved to combat stations, establishing a permanent patrol zone that physically prevents Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, fast attack craft from leaving port. Now, the Pentagon had already warned that any further interference with international commercial shipping would trigger a decisive response. That warning? It just got cashed in. U.S. naval assets are currently conducting live-fire deterrence exercises around the Chabahar port, effectively bottling up Iran's eastern maritime access. But here's where it gets bigger than the initial scope. See, the U.S. didn't just initiate a blockade. There are emerging reports of 4 Iranian oil tankers seized in the Gulf of Oman as of 1400 today. 3 major U.S.-led international shipping coalitions officially suspending all transit through the strait. 65 international commercial vessels currently diverted or idling in the Arabian Sea, awaiting further instructions. IRGC missile batteries being activated in the southern coastal provinces, according to satellite imagery from Maxar Technologies. Let that sink in. Roughly 20% of the world's daily oil supply, frozen. Global shipping routes for vital commodities, compromised. And the White House just issued a formal declaration demanding immediate cessation of all Iranian naval activity in the area. This isn't a regional skirmish anymore. This is a deliberate, systematic move toward a total energy embargo. And the White House is making sure the message of U.S. dominance reaches every capital from Tehran to Beijing. Now you might be asking, why would Tehran escalate this way? Why provoke a U.S. naval force they know they cannot defeat in a conventional maritime battle? Why threaten the very oil exports that keep their regime afloat? Because the Iranian leadership isn't fighting to win a traditional naval war. They are fighting to force a total global energy crisis. When the U.S. closed the ports and understand the critical context most coverage misses, the regime in Tehran lost its last shred of economic leverage. They lost their ability to fund their proxy network without bypassing the global financial system. The Iranian supreme leader immediately convened the Supreme National Security Council, declaring that if Iran cannot export oil, no one in the region will be permitted to export it either. So when a spokesperson for the Iranian Foreign Ministry says this is an act of war against the sovereignty of the Iranian people, that tells you everything. A new power center, the radical elements within the IRGC, is running the show. The old mechanism of back-channel diplomacy is dead, and the regime has decided this is their Alamo moment, a last-stand defensive strategy designed to burn the house down to prevent their own political extinction. Now here's the part no one in Washington wants to talk about. The Pentagon told the press 2 weeks ago that a limited naval intervention would stabilize the region within 48 hours. But according to the Defense Department's own internal assessment, the current Carrier Strike Group deployment is designed for standard freedom of navigation patrols, not a permanent, high-intensity blockade of a hostile nation. That's a 10-day gap between political promises and naval reality. And already, on day 3 of this operation, here's what's happened. The U.S. Navy has run out of rapid deployment minesweepers capable of clearing the strait, as reported by Reuters. Logistical support for the strike group is currently stretched thin, with fuel tankers falling behind schedule by 72 hours, according to the U.S. Naval Institute. Iranian swarm tactics are effectively jamming U.S. radar systems in the near-coastal environment, a failure openly admitted by senior officers speaking to the WSJ. The Pentagon's cyber defense networks have been subjected to sustained, high-level probing, resulting in temporary communication outages. The New York Times is now reporting that senior defense officials are deeply concerned about the sustainability of the current blockade posture. They are losing the initiative in too many places, and the Pentagon simply can't protect every tanker while simultaneously neutralizing coastal missile threats. This was supposed to be a precision-targeted deterrence operation. That's the exact phrase Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin used with the Congressional Armed Services Committee. But Iran turned it into something very different, a chaotic, multi-front naval insurgency that the current U.S. force posture was never built to contain. Let's zoom out, because this stopped being a local dispute about 72 hours ago. The United Kingdom has officially announced the deployment of the HMS Queen Elizabeth carrier strike group to the region after the strike on British-linked vessels. Royal Air Force Typhoons are already positioned at Al Udeid Air Base. France is moving the Charles de Gaulle nuclear-powered aircraft carrier toward the Red Sea. And the French Minister of the Armed Forces just said they will not stand by while the global arteries of trade are severed by state-sponsored maritime terrorism. That's 5 major world powers now actively engaged against Iranian proxies. 5. And China just suspended all heavy crude purchases from the region, citing unpredictable shipping disruptions. Japan has followed suit, canceling over 14 crude oil shipments scheduled for this week. Over 800 total flights and shipping contracts are now disrupted across the entire Middle East. Major energy players like Shell and BP have suspended all operations in the Gulf until at least mid-May. The European Union is scrambling to figure out their winter energy logistics now that both the pipeline flows and maritime corridors are compromised. Brent crude just touched $126.41 and is still climbing. The price of natural gas spiked to $4.85 per million BTU, a 22% increase in less than 48 hours. The Rial in Iran jumped to 1.8 million to the dollar, a sign that massive capital is fleeing the market at breakneck speed. And we're on day 4. Here's what most coverage is missing. Iran knows it can't win this conflict conventionally. The math just doesn't work. You are facing the combined air and naval power of the United States, the UK, and their regional allies. A force that includes thousands of advanced aircraft and dozens of capital ships. That's an unwinnable equation. But Iran isn't trying to win the surface objective of controlling the strait. Iran is trying to make the United States suffer a total political collapse of its Middle East policy. Think about it. Every economic disruption becomes a voter pain point that every American feels at the gas pump and the grocery store. The current administration built its brand on energy independence and stable foreign policy. It mocked the previous leadership over its inability to control regional actors. And now, under their watch, we have a total energy embargo that is driving inflation to levels not seen since the 1970s. The opposition party doesn't even need to campaign. The footage of burning tankers and the data on $130 oil do it for them. Fox News, which the current administration has personally attacked as a purveyor of disinformation, is going to run every single story on this catastrophe on a loop. And when the midterms come in November, the administration loses its mandate. A leader without a majority in Congress is a powerless figure on the world stage. Iran knows this. That's the real strategy, not winning the war, but breaking the American domestic consensus. According to military analysts at the Brookings Institution, the Council on Foreign Relations, and senior defense experts who have weighed in, the current blockade is unsustainable without a permanent, massive ground troop presence. There are scenarios in which a diplomatic freeze occurs before the worst consequences materialize. There are also scenarios in which this escalation pattern continues, costs mount, and the conflict becomes a regional disaster that reshapes global trade for the next 2 decades. The honest answer is, nobody knows. And I mean that literally. Every analyst, every think tank, every intelligence agency is operating on outdated assumptions right now. The Wall Street Journal published a piece yesterday saying the White House is confident in a short-term resolution. But here's the critical point. Whatever comes after this blockade is going to be more complex, more radical, and far more dangerous. There are already reports, which are currently emerging from regional intelligence nodes, that Iranian proxies in Iraq are mobilizing for a ground-based attack on U.S.-occupied energy facilities. Meanwhile, the Supreme Leader's office just announced, and I quote, "The gates of hell are now open for those who seek to starve the Iranian nation." We don't know what that means. Could be a massive cyber attack on the U.S. electrical grid. Could be the activation of sleeper cells in the Gulf states. Could be something nobody's even considered yet. Because when a regime decides it has nothing left to lose, when it fights not for trade routes but for survival, every red line disappears. Every calculation goes out the window, and every prediction becomes worthless. We are witnessing something that will reshape the Middle East, the global energy market, and the American political landscape for a generation. And we're only 4 days in. I'm going to keep covering this as it develops, pulling from military analysis, shipping data, and intelligence sources, because no single outlet is giving you the full picture. If you want to stay informed without the noise, subscribe and turn on notifications. I'll be back with an updated analysis as soon as the next major development breaks. Stay safe out there. I'll see you in the next one.